Hi gang. Today's lecture is going to be the second in our series on Aristotle. And today I want to talk to you briefly about Aristotle and the Aristotelian Arc, or Aristotle and the Arc of Tragedy. So this sounds fancy, but it's really not. This is one of those lectures that I love because you already know this. You just don't know you know it. So I'm going to share with you what you already know and sort of stitch it together with your own experience and hopefully help you put some things together. And that's the most exciting thing, when something in a classroom that's abstract ties in with something you already know in your life that you use all the time, and then you start putting things together. So that's very exciting. And I'm going to help with that experience and with that process. So we're going to talk about the Aristotelian Arc. And that's a fancy word or a fancy phrase for something, as I said, you already know. And what Aristotle said in Poetics, which, if you remember, is his writing about dramatic structure and tragedy. What he said about drama and dramatic structure, typical dramatic structure and the order of play, is that you can understand, or we can understand literature and drama and things on stage. We can understand them graphically, and we can understand them in what's called a temporal way. And temporal is a word that indicates order and time. The order of things as they fall, and the time that it takes for them to do that. And time indicates a series of events on a timeline. So this is a linear concept of time, right? And Aristotle is saying to us that we can not only understand the drama in a temporal way, but we can graph it on paper or on a blackboard. And we can see graphically how this stuff goes together, how these events go together toward a climax. And not only that, what's really cool is there's a playwright, and he's a modern American playwright, contemporary American playwright. And he says in his research that, and his name is David, it's escaping me, I'll think of it. He says that in his research, that psychologically, this is the way we tell our stories. This is the way that human beings tell our stories, not only to each other, but to ourselves. It's how we understand our lives. And that's really cool, right? So one of the things that ties us all together is that we tell each other and ourselves the stories of our lives in the same way. It's natural. It's natural to us. It's pure nature. It's our nature. It's our human nature to tell each other and ourselves the stories of our lives this way. So that's really cool. And you're going to see that it's kind of true for yourself. Okay, so enough backstory. What we start off with is, graphically, is what's called a status quo. Status quo, all that means is the state of affairs, or the present state, right? Status quo. Things the way they are right this minute. And things for us are right now, I mean, you've got the lecture in front of you online, you've got me talking to you, you probably are in your home or your business, and the air conditioning probably works, unlike this building right now, which is like 75 or 80 degrees. So it's deeply uncomfortable, but you're comfortable. So the status quo is things are in balance. Things are good. I'm looking around, things feel okay. I may have some things coming up in the future. I may be worried about a couple of other classes, but right now, your old buddy Dave is talking to you and things are okay, right? Status quo. Now something is going to interrupt that, right? Something is going to interrupt that balance. And balance is really key in theater. When things are in balance, we're okay. We don't have to pay attention to what's going on. But when things are knocked out of balance, when someone's desire interrupts your desire, when you have desires that are competing, then things are out of balance. And it may be a natural event that happens, or it may be somebody else stepping into your world and saying, I want what you have, and you don't want to give that up. So we have what's called an inciting incident, right? So we're riding along on the status quo, and things are okay. Things are hit. But something knocks the status quo out of balance. This point right here is called the inciting incident, right? Inciting incident. And if we take a look at the word incite, you oftentimes hear the word incite used to describe a crime or a riot. What incited the riot? You can get in trouble with the law for inciting a riot, for starting trouble. So inciting is starting. Incident is just what it sounds like. It's an event, right? So we have the starting event, and it happens right here, right? And this is what knocks things out of balance. And this is what makes the tension and the action rise. So we got let's say we have two competing desires here. We have the hero and we have the villain. We have the protagonist and we have the antagonist. And that's in, I might as well have that down. Antagonist that's your villain. Because your protagonist is your hero. And these are based in the Greek. It's really easy to understand where these words come from. A-N-T, anta, anti, against. Anti, right? And pro, for. So for and against, right? So that's pretty easy. So we have this rising action. And this is tension. We call this actually rising action. And it's rising because we have a series of conflicts that happen along the way. And that conflict, that'll happen here. That's another conflict right there. This is a conflict. This is a conflict. And the tension will drop from here. Now we're understanding this so far. This is a timeline, right? This is a line that takes us through a series of events on a time scale, on a time continuum. So we've got an event, a crisis that happens here. Think of this as the gunfight. Here's a gunfight in a Western. And that tension after the gunfight, that tension drops a little bit. But not too much. Not too much. And then there's another conflict, right? And that sends us up here. And then there's a climax, a mini climax, which happens. And then after that conflict, that climax, the tension drops a little bit, right? And this continues throughout the drama. These small crises. I'm not going to use the word crisis here. I mistakenly did that because crisis actually happens. And one of these is very specific. So we've got these little conflicts, we have these little climaxes, and then we have a drop falling action. So we return to a state. You can't sustain tension for 2 hours without dropping the tension every once in a while because we can't sustain that kind of a tension. I mean, we have to have a tension like goldfish anymore anyway. So what we do is we raise the tension and then we drop it a little bit. And we raise the tension and drop it a little bit. And so you have this jagged experience that finally, not finally, but almost finally, event involves what's called the crisis. And the crisis, that's crisis with a capital C. This is the interesting part to me. There are a couple of really interesting parts. The inciting incident, the crisis, and then we'll get to the other ones. The crisis is the point of no return. Like, so far, we've had, and at any point, the protagonist could step out of the conflict. Could say, okay, you know what? You can have whatever you want, antagonist. You can have whatever you want, villain. I'm out. You know, I'm washing my hands of this whole process. I'm out. But at the point of crisis, it becomes a point of no return. It becomes what did I write down? An inevitability. That's what's exciting about this. This is the point of inevitably. Inevitability. There's a lot more letters in here. It's really hard to write and talk at the same time. I don't know if you knew that. So anyway, there's the point of inevitability. And this is where there is no turning back. There will be a final conflict. And we have that story, man, we have that story everywhere. We have that story in religion. We have that story like in the Bible. In the Old Testament, we talk about Megiddo. The field of Megiddo is where the final conflict is going to happen. And then Christians adopted that story, and we understand through the book of Revelations that this is where it's going to happen. This is where it's going to, the final conflict of, it's everywhere. It's all over our own entertainment. This point of inevitability, that the final conflict will happen. Marvel, right? Marvel Universe has this story woven into it. This is the way we think. This is the way we tell ourselves about our lives. We understand our conflicts and our victories this way. And that's really cool, because you already experienced this psychologically. You already experience it in your entertainment. You already experience it in the books you read and the television you watch and the films that you go to see and or stay home and stream, and the plays that you hopefully will go see. We already do this. That's really cool. So, point of crisis. There's one last point on this arc. Is we got to drop some action a little bit. We got to drop some tension, because we're going to ramp up at this point. And we're going to ramp up to what we call the climax. This is the final battle, right? The climax. Big C. This is the final victory, the final battle. This is where it's won or lost. Usually in tragedy, this is where the hero, the protagonist, falls. This is where they lose. They lose in the physical sense, but there is a moral victory there. And I can explain that. I'll explain that differently in a sort of an expression of tragedy. But this is what we adopt. This is the way that we adopt all, or the arc that we adopt for all of our entertainment. This final climax. This is the final gun battle, or the shootout. This is the shootout of the OK Corral. This is what? Oh gosh, it's escaping me. The Thors. Anyway, doesn't matter. This is it. And it's not as interesting to me, personally, but it's the point at highest tension. So personally, I'm more interested in the crisis. I'm more interested in the moment that makes this inevitable. So after the crisis, or after the climax, we have nothing but falling action. And I'm gonna label this falling action. And you know this moment. You know what it feels like. It's that, oh my God, you're reeling, your head is reeling, I can't believe what I just saw. It's where you can breathe again. It's where we're tying up loose ends. Or actually, we get down to here, and let me make sure that yeah, there we go. At this point, we are not tying up loose ends. We are actually unraveling the plot. So, probably here, this is where it kind of all unravels. This is the point at which it all unravels. All of the stuff that has gone into building up to this moment unravels. And we have a word for that. The French have a word for it. It's called dénouement. All right? And so I will write that out. It's French. It literally translates untie, which is very cool. Very cool. Because this word, untie, indicates what's happening this entire time. It's the unraveling, right? It's the untying of all the knots that have been tied up, that have been tied to get to this point. Leave it to the French, right? So, we get through dénouement, right? The untying. And now we're on a new timeline. We're here. And this is the new status quo. This is the new state of affairs, the new present state. We've achieved balance. We've re-achieved balance. So we had balance here. We're re-achieving balance here. But the tension that we leave the play at the end is never as low as when we started. There is still more tension here, more energy here than there was here. And that's because that's how we think of life. We've learned something. We've experienced something. We've added something to our experiences, and that energizes us. And so we can never leave the stage, we can never leave the theater in as low a state as we came in. Even though our hero, our protagonist, might have lost here in tragedy, we're still energized by that. We're shocked and in awe of that loss, and maybe that sacrifice. Does that make sense? So we have the new status quo, which is higher level, a higher energy level than when we walked in. And we're waiting now. We're on a new timeline. And so we're waiting for the next what? Inciting incident. It's a continuum. It's a continuous experience. It's a continuous narrative. And as Aristotle observed, I wanted to do this in color. This is really high tech. So as he observed, this is an arc. And so that's why we call it the Aristotelian Arc. Because this is the shape of the way we tell our stories. Last thing I want to touch base on is out here in our new status quo, this is where we reflect on what happened. This is called the time of criticism. And criticism has a different word for us now than it had in days past. A different common term, or common understanding. Criticism is not telling somebody what they did wrong. Criticism is reflection. It is analysis. So this is when we reflect on what we saw, reflect on what we experienced, and now this has been an emotional experience, right? This is an emotional arc. Down here is where we regain our senses as we're walking out of the theater, or as maybe we're just sitting in the seats. But as we're walking out, as we're grabbing a drink or some dinner after the show, we're reflecting with our friends. What did we just see? What happened? I don't know. What do you think? Intellectually. This is when our brain kicks in. And we say, okay, what I saw, first of all, what did I just see? What did we just see? What did we just experience together? Second of all, was it believable? We just suspended our disbelief for the sake of what was on stage. Was it believable? Was it moving emotionally? Well, you can tell that pretty easily at the end of a play, or a movie, if there is a lot of silence. If people are still reeling, if you and your friends are still reeling with what you experienced emotionally. So that's a pretty easy one. Was the play thought-provoking? That's an easy one too, because are you actually talking about this now? You've had, there's some time passed where you've experienced what you have emotionally, and you've reflected on that, and now your brain kicks in, and now are you flooded with thought? It's like, what did I see? Well, I saw hints of this and hints of that, and it was like Ragnarok. And where did Ragnarok come from? What is that word? I got to get on the internet and find out, because I've got the Compendium of Western Civilization. My phone is over there. I've got, what is Ragnarok? And it turns out that it's it's Armageddon. Which is this story again, Viking Armageddon. It's the story that keeps finding its way into our consciousnesses. We have this anticipation of a final battle. We have this anticipation of a climax to this story of being human, right? And it's in every culture, and it's so exciting. So, what other historical current events might have influenced the writing of this play? So these are questions that you'll ask over drinks with your friends. What artwork might have influenced it? The three last questions, you've got the lecture in front of you, and I'm just talking from it. The three last questions are, I think, the most important questions, and they are actually from another poet and another philosopher, German this time. His name is Goethe, and leave it to the Germans, right? There are no letters in there in the English language, Goethe. There's no R in Goethe, and yet we make the R sound. Anyway, Germans, what are you going to do? And the three last questions are, what was the play trying to achieve? This is sort of sums where it comes all together. What is the play trying to achieve? Was it successful in achieving that goal? What was the play's goal? Was it successful in achieving that goal? And then the final question, which is the most interesting, I think, is, was it worth it? That's the story of the way we tell stories, is this arc. And then criticism that happens out here. Reflection. And reflection. I'll write that down. That's important. And then you can reflect upon it as well. I wish I could take questions. We're not in the same room together. Email me questions. I think that this is super cool because it's all of us. It's the story of us. This is the story of our stories. And I think that's really cool. And I hope you do too. You probably have the lecture in front of you already. If you want to ask any questions, email me. Tell me what you think about this. This is an astonishing thing from my life to yours. So let me know what you think, okay? Peace.